Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective. Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Peter Fanger. My guest today is Dr. Richard Grossman. Dr. Grossman is a licensed acupuncturist and doctor of Oriental medicine whose lifelong dedication to healing began after an early trauma sparked his fascination with the power of plants and the mind. Trained in Los Angeles and later in Beijing under the World Health Organization program, he spent decades weaving together Oriental medicine, functional medicine, and deep spiritual practice. His work with ayahuasca and sound healing, shaped by extensive study with indigenous shamans in Ecuador and Peru, has evolved into unique synthesis of Amazonian shamanism, energy medicine, and multisensory ceremony. Richard is also the author of Trust and Forgive, the Medicine of Your Life. Today, he guides individuals toward profound emotional, physical, and spiritual healing, always rooted in his core intention to help others out of suffering by finding a source of joy within. Our episode today explores Richard's journey from early trauma to a lifetime of healing, diving into spiritual and therapeutic dimensions of ayahuasca, the role of music and multicultural ceremony, and the integration of plant medicine insights and how personal transformation contributes to collective healing. Well, I'm very excited to have Richard on the show with me today. Richard, welcome to our show. Very excited to have you.
Very great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. I know I've had a lot of fun learning more about you and your work and really your lifelong path toward healing. But I'm really kind of curious. I know that early experiences kind of shaped both physical and emotional trauma, inspired your fascination with medicinal plants. Can I ask, how did those early experiences influence your lifelong path into healing?
Starting off with being born, I'm going to leave that part off because I don't quite remember all of it clearly. I don't remember any of
Yeah.
it really.
Mhm.
But when I was quite young, I can't recall exactly, around 4 or 5 years old, I got a bicycle for my birthday.
Mm.
And one thing led to another. It was a rainy day in Los Angeles, and it rained had just finished, and everything was wet and slippery, and the bicycle got stuck in a place where somebody could ride it, and the rear wheel would spin very rapidly. And a friend of mine was doing this, and I'm looking at the rear wheel, and with the innocence of a child, of a barely, out of a babyhood, I thought to myself, and I don't know where this thought came from, if I can't see it, is it still there? And I put my finger into the spokes. And that was intense, to say the least. It ended with me having only a part of an index finger. And that was the beginning of the traumatic cycle, because when I went to the hospital, I mean, I remember very little about it, riding in a car, screaming, blood everywhere, and my mother saying, "It's okay, it's okay." And my poor mother was, you know, barely in her 20s at that point, so she didn't have a lot of life experience and came out of the greatest generation in World War II and the Holocaust and all of that stuff, and not being part of it, but being aware of it. So for her, this was incredibly traumatic to see her firstborn in this kind of state. But then we got to the hospital, and I don't remember anything except little parts of it. I was on the table. They were about to operate on me. And I remember seeing this mask coming down onto my face and the worst smell ever. And then I'm spiraling down this tunnel of light. And as I'm spiraling down this tunnel of light, I was very aware of a number of people, I think 3, 4 people, or beings, I would say, not people, standing above me wearing cowls and looking down at me and talking about me and telling me everything. And the last thing they said before I went completely unconscious was, "Whatever you do, don't forget what we've told you." And of course, when I came to, that's all I remembered. Don't forget anything that we told you. And I forgot everything that they told me, at least consciously. But that was an incredibly powerful altered state of consciousness in a being who was theoretically not ready for it, child,
Mm,
baby. And so that kind of broke me in a lot of ways as I'm growing
mm,
up. I was aware for much of my life that I was broken, that I wasn't like everybody else. And, nobody else had had this experience of spiraling down tunnels of light and having, probably they would be related to the Watchers out of the Book of Enoch, looking at me and teaching me. And and so that led to a need for healing that I didn't realize was a need for healing till I hit my early teens.
mm,
And I was incredibly interested in all things spiritual at that point. I was starting to read spiritual books, the first one being Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, which I recommend to everybody to read. It's a phenomenal book even now. And reading Be Here Now and all of these things I was reading were like, there's something that I don't understand that I need to understand to
mm,
heal. There's something I need to know here to help me release this pain that was inside of me, because the pain led to stomach problems and to emotional problems. I was always on the verge of, blowing up in anger when I was a kid. My
mm,
poor parents had to deal with me. Bless their hearts, bless their souls.
yeah,
And so at some point, because of the time I grew up, somebody gave me a joint and I smoked it.
mm,
And
mhm,
they were, my friends were all like talking and laughing. And I'm like sitting there like this. And I just want to
mm,
understand and using it as a way to go deep inside of myself. That led to me, discovering headphones and certain musics where I could put the headphones on and smoke marijuana. And, I wasn't even 18 yet when I was doing this. I was thinking my 16, 17 years old. And I'd sit and I'd let my body go and I'd have these beautiful experiences, but they didn't heal me. They were like, you know, they were like hints coming from the side of the stage saying, there's something here, but this isn't it.
mm,
I started in a serious meditation practice at 18, went to India, sat on the banks of the Ganges, meditating and reading the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita, and beautiful experiences. Smoked marijuana with sadhus and had incredible experiences with that. When I was about 18, somebody gave me some acid,
mhm,
and I had no idea what it was. I was living up in Berkeley in a commune. I was kind of studying Gandhian nonviolence. I left home when I was the day after I graduated high school and wanted to discover what was real, because I just could tell that where I was living in, middle class Los Angeles, upper middle class Los Angeles wasn't real. And so the guy handed me a tab of acid and I took it. And at that point, I had a beard. I've had a beard most of my life. And
right,
he thought I was in my 20s. I was 16. And
mhm.
so he gave me 4 hits of acid. And I looked at it and said, wow, cool. I didn't know it was 4 hits of acid. And then I swallowed it and his eyes popped open. He said, that was for both of us.
Oh no. Oh wow.
And the next thing I knew, he said, let's go watch Woodstock. It's down the street and to the theater. And I'm
Nice.
walking and like reality starting to melt around me. And I walk into the theater at exactly the wrong time at the scene where they're pumping out the porta potties. And
Mm.
I'm like, this is too much. I'm going home. And unfortunately, I went home, or fortunately, went into
Right.
my bedroom and I had no basis for what was happening. Reality was dissolving around me. I was feeling cosmic cosmic energy all
Mm,
around me.
mhm,
And it terrified me,
yeah.
terrified. And because, even though I was having this beautiful experience on one hand, the trauma was like, I'm going to eat you. I'm going to
Mm.
devour you. I'm going to put you in fear. Led to one of the people in the commune. This is the funniest story, but I'm not going to say it because it's in my book and it's kind of weird. But the funniest story was somebody handed me a copy of Tim Leary's The Psychedelic Experience,
Mhm.
and which was based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, for those of you who don't know it. And I started reading it, and the letters were turning into Sanskrit in front of me, and it was like, whoa, this is wild. And it was like, just surrender to the light. And I sat
Mm.
down and I surrendered to the light and
Mm.
had the most beautiful of all experiences I think a human being could have. And it
Yeah.
made perfect sense to me. And I was there, I don't know how long, but it was so beautiful. And then I had to
Mm.
pee. Nothing I was seeing made sense. I was in
Yeah.
this old building in Berkeley, and I went to pee, and the pee was making these beautiful noises, turning into patterns of light in front of me. And I left the bathroom, and,
Wow.
and one of the people in the commune, who happened to be a Mormon elder, looked at me and said, "Oh, you're getting over an illness up there."
Mm.
And I'm like, walked into my bedroom, sat down, getting over an illness. Socrates, in his last words, set a cock for Asclepius because he was giving a sacrifice to the gods to welcome his death. So I'm dead. This is the Bardo state. Because I got as far in the book as Bardo's, right? This is the
Yeah.
Bardo state. And, I'm like looking out the window, and 1 minute Berkeley is hell and flames and, stuff. And the second minute it turns into heaven, and then hell, then heaven, then hell, then heaven. And I didn't come back from that for a long time, for
Mm.
several years. Not totally. I mean, not totally. I wasn't like completely psychotic, just mildly psychotic, I would say.
Mhm.
And I'd walk down the street and there'd be monsters coming out of the sewers. And, like, well, just brush your teeth and brush your hair and don't tell anybody because they'll put you away for this. So
Mm.
it's like I had gotten a certain distance in that psychedelic experience, but I hadn't
Yes.
gone far enough.
Mm.
So, I had a few more experiences with LSD, and they were all very powerful. One time I looked at an oak leaf. I was up in Sycamore Canyon in Malibu and looked at an oak leaf, and it turned into universes. And I just went into these universes. It was beautiful, but at the same time, there was like this disconnection from reality. I didn't know where I was.
Mm.
I didn't know who
Mhm.
I was. I didn't have any idea. So some years passed, and I decided I wanted to study Oriental medicine, and went through a 3-year program, ending up in China, doing Tai Chi, taking Chinese medicine, getting acupuncture. And that all helped, but there was still something in the pit of my stomach that wasn't right.
Mm.
There's still like this feeling like the universe could fracture underneath me, and I'd be back in that heaven and hell state, or hell state, more like.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine who I'd known since I was a teenager called me up one day and said, "I'm working with psychedelics. I think it would really benefit you." He
Mm.
left his healing practice to become a psychedelic therapist before that anybody was a psychedelic therapist practically. And so we started working with various plant medicines and chemical substances, and they were good, they were good, they were good. They help, they help, they help, but still, no, still I was in
Mm.
pain. And then he vanished from my life for a while, and then called me up one day and said, "I just got back from the Amazon and I have some ayahuasca with me. This is going to be what's going to heal you. Want to do it?" And I thought about it for about a thousandth of a second and said, "Absolutely." And he said, "Okay, come by, in a few days and we'll do this. And next thing I knew, I had a
Mhm.
cup in my hand and I'm drinking this cup. And this was his early day. I think when I was one of his first people he worked with. In my book, he's El Viejo. I can't say his name, but he's El Viejo in my book.
Mhm.
And had the most extraordinary experience of lifetimes of healing. And the first visionary state, well, the first thing was, of course, the beautiful ayahuasca fractals and sacred geometry. And I'm lying there going, I can get into this. This is very nice. I love this. But then like something
Mhm.
switched, and in an instant, I was looking at a Nazi concentration camp.
Mhm.
And an instant later, I was in the Nazi concentration camp
Mhm.
as a Jew about to be executed, basically. And I'm thinking to myself, I knew it wasn't real. I knew it was a vision because I could still feel my body lying down in the room and I could still hear the music being played. But it was so real and so three-dimensional, like something have had very few times that happened to me.
Mhm.
And so I'm walking in this line of people going towards the ovens or the gas chambers, and I put out this, what do I do? How do I get out of this? And I'm like really like asking the universe, how do I get out of this? Or asking myself, asking God. I don't know who I was asking. I was asking. And this
Mhm.
voice came in that just said, trust and forgive.
Mhm.
Um, no way can I trust or forgive this. What do I do? Trust and forgive. This went on for I don't know how long, a while. And I finally got it, what it meant. And it didn't mean to forgive the situation, to forgive the perpetrators of the situation. It meant to allow what I was experiencing to dissolve into love and dissolve into the winds of time and let the winds of time wash it away. And as soon as I got that, it just like faded away. And I realized while I wasn't there, I mean, who knows about past lifetimes, but while I don't have any heritage that was there, my family came over to this United States around the turn of the century. And so what not part of that, but it was trust and forgive. And,
Mhm.
I thought that was it, but then I was someplace else and then someplace else and then someplace else, each time getting more and more horrific in ways. And each time trust and forgive, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. And when it was over, I realized that that wasn't in the bottle, that was in me. Somehow,
Yes.
somehow
Yes.
that was in me. And that in forgiving it, I was releasing it from my field and in a way, clearing the karma of it all out of me.
Mm. Mhm.
And that was my
Yeah.
introduction to ayahuasca. Very
Wow.
powerful, very amazing experience. And I
Yeah.
want to just
What
say,
a
if anybody's ever going to
profound
do
journey.
ayahuasca, don't expect stuff like that. It doesn't always happen that way.
Well,
Rarely, I would say.
I think what you're doing in that story is you've done a very, very good job of sort of charting that path, right? There's a curiosity that was involved, a longing, a search for something. I'm kind of curious because I know that your formal training has included Oriental medicine and acupuncture and functional medicine. How has those helped reinforce that exploration into psychedelics and healing?
A really good question. I'm going to have to think about it a moment because I've always looked at it as two different worlds, that didn't really kind of like went parallel but didn't really meet. But in thinking about it, I would say that personally, all of that work with Chinese medicine and functional medicine helped me to heal my body enough to where I would be ready to hold that intense psychedelic experience, that intense experience of ayahuasca. And there was also the part of Chinese philosophy, which I love, of looking at the world in terms of energy flows and yin and yang and five elements and eight conditions and all this stuff that won't mean too much to anybody who's not a Chinese doctor. But, and the yin yang is much more than a symbol of Chinese restaurants on menus. But it helped me to understand energy. The place where I got Chinese medicine, there were 2 points when I got it. One was when I actually gave somebody a treatment when I was a baby student. Pulled up on my book and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to use these points on this person. And a situation that she had been carrying for the last 4 years healed that night. I was like, okay, this works. And the second part came when I realized that Chinese philosophy was just a different way of looking at the same reality we live in,
Mm.
but from a totally different perspective. And I got that the perspective of Chinese philosophy, Chinese medical philosophy, coexisted with how we perceive in the West the world. I could say the North, probably more, well, West, North, Northwest, more accurately, how we perceive the world. And they weren't contradictory. So then when I started getting into Amazonian medicine, it was also a different way of perceiving the same world, but also not contradictory, that they could all exist together as a sort of a unified whole. I don't want to say I'm pushing Chinese medicine into Amazonian medicine or Western philosophy into Chinese medicine or anything like that, but I'm like holding them all at the same time in my being,
Mm.
not as exclusive, but as complementary.
Yes. Yeah, I've almost heard that idea of thought as almost divergent thought, right? We recognize the cultures that we're gaining our understanding from, and we diverge it into something different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could be even
Yeah.
evolve it into something different.
Evolve. Yes, that's another good word.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Continuing education is both a requirement and a learning opportunity, but finding the right CE provider can be challenging. AATBS, a triad company, offers continuing education for psychologists, social workers, marriage and family therapists, counselors, and behavior analysts. CE courses are available both individually and as part of our new All Access Pass. All Access Pass provides a library of over 250 unique courses. That's more than 800 hours of CEs, with new courses being added every month. As a special offer, Behavioral Health Today listeners can save 15% on CE purchases. Visit us at aatbs.com/BHT and enter promo code BHT15 during checkout. That's aatbs.com/BHT. Check out our library and check off your CE requirements today.
So I want to talk about your ceremony structure and really the philosophy, because I know you're very intentional about how you are guiding folks through the ceremony. From a 4,000-foot view, I know that you do group ceremonies as well as one-on-one practice, where you can guide somebody through one-on-one. But I also know that you're incorporating music, quiet, acupuncture. You're very intentional about how you've structured your ceremonies. So talk to me about how you are crafting this setting into a unified ceremony. What are you doing with ayahuasca and these ceremonies?
I'm giving it to people, number one. And I'm making sure that they're well prepared before they come into ceremony
Mhm,
through the dieta, I have a whole like manual that I give people that they study before ceremonies
mhm,
that involves, I think everybody who's going to do an ayahuasca ceremony should learn to sit still for at least a half an hour and learn to feel what they're feeling and not try to make things go away. They also need to cleanse their body with diet and, avoid certain things that might be contradictory, which is not so important, but it's important. And then, when I do a ceremony, I spend at least an hour before the ceremony, before each ceremony, talking with people, talking about how the healing works, talking about what they might come up against, talking about how to deal what happens if they see a 45-foot googly-eyed monster that wants to eat their face, things like that, which also doesn't happen in ayahuasca ceremonies, at least mine. But, I like to inject a little bit of humor into things. And so I prepare them so let's say you do have a bad experience. Let's say you're having a
Yes.
negative experience, a so-called negative experience. How do you deal with it?
Mhm.
And there's different philosophies about this in the ayahuasca and in the healing world. Like one philosophy is you scream it out, right? You yell and holler and scream and cry and gnash your teeth and beat the floor or beat a pillow or hopefully not beat the person sitting next to you, but you emote it, you get it out. You talk it out, you explain it, you understand it. And what I saw in many years of attending ceremonies is that people who did this, I saw people who do the same thing for years, and they hadn't healed yet. So what I learned in that first ceremony of trust and forgive, it's like,
Yes.
can you sit? And I encourage people to sit. Can you sit feeling the pain, feeling the fear, feeling the guilt, feeling the shame, feeling the remorse, feeling whatever it is you're feeling and not engage with it? Okay. Not try to understand it, not try to make up a story about it, because the story becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. So if you don't make up a story, what is it? There's sensations in your body, there's sensations in your mind, there's neurons firing. And if you stick with it long enough, which could be anywhere from 5 seconds to, the whole evening, but if you stick with it long enough, you hit that place of trust, you hit that place of forgiveness. And whatever it is that's disturbing you during the ceremony has the ability to, and this is a really important phrase I think I created, I don't know, but has the ability to dissolve into the unreality it already was. Because
Yes.
these things are not real. The visions are not real. What you experience is not real. The fear, the emotions are not real in big R reality, in the reality of divine, infinite love, joy, peace, and consciousness. That's where they're not real. And so if you can be with it long enough, it dissolves, and then you're sitting there. And it's just you sitting there, you and the music and your breath and the medicine. And that is so beautiful when people get to that stage. I call it the pin drop moment of ceremony, where it's so still and so quiet. If I dropped a pin, it would echo in the room. It's like this sublime stillness. So, and to get people there, we do some of the traditional kind of ceremony stuff of chanting and songs and, but what I've incorporated, which I think is kind of unique, is poetry. Often, we'll have 2 or 3 intense songs, and I have some kick-ass people working with me, and I'm pretty kick-ass myself, I have to say. So, but then there's like that moment where it's a break, and I'll read a Sufi poem or a poem out of one of the spiritual traditions. And those hit so deeply because here it is. Somebody 2,000 years ago was having a similar experience, and this is how they dealt with it. That's so beautiful. And we also incorporate a lot of instruments, and a lot of people are doing that now. We have didgeridoo duels sometimes, me and my assistant, and flutes and kalimbas, and we recently added crystal bowls and gong. I've been doing gongs for a long time, but crystal bowls and metallic bowls, and That's usually towards the end of about a 30-minute sound bath. I think they call it sound baths now. Experience. We have somebody who comes and plays sitar sometimes, or different people bring their talents into it. And I encourage people not to right away share their talents or their heart in ceremony, but to sit for a number of ceremonies, and then when it's right, to maybe they can share a song, maybe they can share some music, because I consider ceremonies to be genius school. School for geniuses. One of the songs, one of the phrases one of my maestras used in Peru was, ayahuasca is the healer of the healers. So I think anybody who sticks with ceremony long enough becomes a healer. They don't have much choice because medicine's, that's one of her agendas.
I so appreciate you painting that picture for us. It sounds, again, very intentional. I think it's very interesting how you are almost asking the person to prepare themselves for that ceremony, right? You're asking them to be able to sit in stillness and to, sit with uncomfortable as they go through that process, because that will help them reach that spiritual understanding at a deeper level. And I think that that comes really from your own experiences there. You're trying to guide folks in a way that you would have wanted to be guided yourself.
Yes. And I never was.
Right. That this is your experience coming through in the work that you are doing.
Yeah.
I'm really curious because you've said that plant medicine complements, but it doesn't replace traditional therapeutic work. Explain to me how these plant medicines can be complementary to that work.
Good question. I just want to add, just from the last conversation, two things. One is from the Borg, resistance is futile. And the other one is what you resist persists. So that goes into ceremony really well. Because my background is in Asian medicine, Chinese medicine, and because Asian medicine is looked at as not just acupuncture, not just herbs, not just qigong, not just massage, not just, inner work, but it's looked at as a combination of all of those. And so ayahuasca to me is very complementary with those things. Well, some people are going to need Western medicine. Some people need it. I can't say that that's a bad thing. It would be best if you don't need it, but some people have problems for which they need Western medicine. That's not a problem as long as it's not a contraindicated medicine.
Hmm.
Some of the groups say you can't have any Western medicine at all, and I'm thinking somebody with thyroid who's taking thyroid is going to have a crisis. Somebody who's, whatever it is, somebody's going to, if they're taking blood pressure medicine, you don't want them to stroke out in the ceremony room floor, So you got to know what's safe and what's not safe. Certain things will not be safe and cannot be used, but most things are not that dangerous with ayahuasca. So when I work with Wachuma especially, I find acupuncture can be incredibly valuable. I've only done it a couple times in ayahuasca, and it was kind of intense for me to stick needles in people when I'm on the medicine.
Sure.
But in
I can
Wachuma, it
imagine.
seems very natural to scan somebody, find out where they're out of balance and where they might be stuck. And most people get stuck in their solar plexus, So sometimes just sticking a needle in that place in the solar plexus where they're stuck can begin a beautiful process of releasing that stuckness there. People who are too in their minds, there's points that'll calm the mind and open up the spiritual world.
Yeah.
There's points that'll just like somebody's angry, there's points that'll diffuse the anger. Not take it away, mind you, because my goal is not to take anything away. It's to harmonize and balance. And that's what Chinese medicine taught me. is that it's really about harmonizing and balancing. Of course, when somebody's in the purge process, they're taking stuff away. They're giving stuff up. And that's a powerful aspect of Chinese medicine that is not of acupuncture, of ayahuasca that is not unknown in Chinese medicine.
Yes.
Mine got ahead of me there.
Well, what I love about this approach that you're offering is ayahuasca, specifically the plant medicine that you're dealing with. It gives an opportunity for us to resolve emotional trauma, for us to resolve some of those emotional stuckness. And what you're showing, especially in the ways that you're integrating a couple different practices in this ceremony, is that, through our body, somatic work, you're talking about acupuncture, there are other ways that we can help push that process along. But ultimately, it is the person's journey to kind of resolve those things. You're just merely giving them an environment and an opportunity to come in, see what you get out of it, and hopefully on the other side of this, you can see real transformation.
Yeah. If a person finds that place in their heart that is love,
Yes.
not love of or not love for, not love because, but just as pure, perfect love, person can find that during ceremony. And to find that, you have to be willing to let go of all the stuff that's not love. And if you can find that, life is transformed forever.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the journey, it's the beginning of the journey, okay?
Yes. 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 You reach that point, and for the next step is for it to radiate out.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about how this spiritual practice almost ripples out into community aspect, right? You talk about how once we reach that place of love, the next step is just the beginning for communities, for others in our life. How have you seen breakthroughs influence the greater community?
I'll give you one example that's the most dramatic one that I know of. There was a woman who came to ceremony who had broken communication with her mother, and her mother had broken communication with her 20 years prior.
Mhm.
They hadn't spoken, they hadn't seen each other. There was nothing but hatred between them. During that particular ceremony, she handled that. She
Mhm.
forgave her mother. She handled it. I mean, it was like magic, beautiful. Ceremony ended. She turned on her phone, and guess who had called her
Mm. Wow.
for the first time in
Huh.
20 years? It was her mother, obviously, but it was her mother.
Yeah.
And so her healing allowed her mother to heal. That was dramatic. I was jaw dropped. Okay. And again, don't expect things like that. That's magic.
Right.
That's miracle.
Yeah.
But I think, as far as going out into the community, I look at how the world is changing. And admittedly, we're in a really big mess right now
Mm.
with so many
Yes.
wars and so much hatred and so much brother against brother and sister against sister and brother against sister and sister against brother. And all this
Right.
stuff is going on. And the environment's collapsing and global warming. And all of these things look quite hopeless to me when I look at it through these eyes. When I look at it through the eyes of my heart or the eye of my heart, I wonder if maybe this isn't that point in ceremony where things are really intense. You're purging your guts out. You want it to end. Everything is going wrong. And yet this is part of a purification. This is part of a healing, a cleansing. And so, how has it changed? This work has changed the world tremendously. Not enough yet, but it's changing it tremendously. And I think the world of today is so far beyond the world of the 70s, 60s, 50s, 80s, 90s. in so many ways, there's so much more awareness and consciousness, and people are talking about things like love. People are talking about things like consciousness. People are talking about things like healing in a way that, wasn't part of the conversation just a short while ago, and perhaps had never been part of the conversation. I can't imagine my parents or my grandparents or my great-grandparents having a conversation like we're having right now. It'd be
Yes.
out of
Yes.
their reality. It couldn't happen, and God bless them all, but that was not part of their reality at that point. And how far back do we have to go to find that when that was a common conversation? There were just pockets of history where that was going on, small pockets. And now, heck, I mean, when I first internationally traveled, I felt like I was, the hot shot who knew everything. And these were all a bunch of, ignorant savages, not really.
No.
But, I was talking about things other people had not ever heard of when I first started traveling internationally, or very few people had heard of. Now it's like I go into any community I go into in the world and people are in the same place.
Yeah.
We've all, have the same, watching the same videos. We're all, doing the same thinking almost about how to bring peace.
Mhm.
And so that to me is the biggest indication. Did ayahuasca do that? Did mushrooms do that? Damn straight. In my opinion, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely,
well,
that's been a big part.
let me
Yeah.
let me follow up on that. So as you sort of see this collective consciousness going in a certain direction, how do you see psychedelics and even more specifically ayahuasca weaved into that direction?
Right. One of the things I realized about ayahuasca in the early days, when I'm looking at all of these northerners, strange northerners down in the jungle trying to be Amazonians and not succeeding at it very well at all.
Yeah.
And then the medicine coming up into the north and
Mhm.
every continent in the world right now, except Antarctica. I don't think there's been any ceremonies in Antarctica yet. I would love to be the first, but I don't think so. But every continent in the world is having this effect on it now. And she wants this to happen. The spirit that ayahuasca reveals inside of a person, this Madre Ayahuasca, this queen of the jungle, this beautiful consciousness wants the humans to heal. Because if we don't, we're going to destroy her home.
Mm.
And also because I think there's a great deal of compassion in that, because to me, ayahuasca, the spirit of ayahuasca is pure love. It is a godly spirit. It is pure love. It is pure gracefulness and graciousness. And so that's how it's percolating out into the world. And on the other hand, one of the paradigms that I use or explanations I use, and I realize if there's any ornithologists out there that this is totally wrong, but I'm making it up because it works as a made up story. So if you see a flock of geese flying in the sky, they fly in this V formation, right? And they're following the head goose. Head goose turns left, the flock turns left, head goose turns right, the flock turns right. Head goose sees a lake, goes down to it, the flock goes down to it. Head goose wants to take off. They take off and they trade off head geese, of course, because it's a lot of work being the first. So the geese in the flock are basically just following the ass in front of them. They don't know where the front goose is going. They don't know what's happening. They don't even know, may not even know who the front goose is. So similarly, there's a small number of people, relatively small number of people who are taking ayahuasca, who are having these amazing soul breakthroughs, the amazing breakthroughs of consciousness, the amazing understanding that reality doesn't have to be the way we've created it to over the last 50,000, 100,000 years. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to stay this way. So their consciousness of this group of people who are finding God within through whatever means, sitting in a monastery meditating 20 hours a day, but they're finding God within through whatever the means are, become the goose at the front of the flock. They may not even know that they're the goose at the front of the flock. The geese behind them may not know that they're the goose in front of the flock. But the consciousness is permeating into a way that begins to affect the group mind, human awareness. Everybody? No. Some people won't, some people will. But I see it, I see it in the way people talk to each other. I see it in the intelligence of some of the shows on television now, or online, I would say.
Yeah. Yes.
I see it in the way that music is incredible now. I mean, not the popular music, but this place where the explorers are going is incredible. And you can have even the popular music, some of the singers in their songs are saying things that would not have tracked 30 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. What's that song? I've realized the problem is me, I'm the problem.
Yep. You're quoting Taylor Swift. That's right.
Taylor Swift, yeah.
Yeah. I love that perspective that you're painting. And, I think what you're really describing is when we are able to align with our true selves, the gift of giving others to align with their true self, whether it's through ayahuasca or therapy or other means, it all kind of points in this direction toward our alignment with a greater source. You pointed toward God. I think that is such a noble direction. And for those that do the work, that bring others alongside to guide them toward their path toward true self or a higher purpose, I think that is a noble cause, and it's worth celebrating.
Let me just add in, because I know that that three-letter word is a four-letter word to many people. So when I speak of God, I'm not talking about the idea of, obviously the old dude up in heaven pulling the strings or riding a cloud or, anything like that, a judgmental being, but I'm talking about more of the South Asian concept of Satchitananda, truth, consciousness, and bliss. Absolute truth, absolute consciousness, absolute bliss is what's in the heart, in every single human heart. It's what exists inside of us. It's who we really are. Okay. And then on the other hand, right, I think it's a Hafez poem, but it might be Rumi. One of the lines I love is, see everything as God, but keep it a secret. So we're not being trained to be evangelicals for ayahuasca or evangelicals for mushrooms or things like that. We're being trained to be people who vibrate at a different level, people who vibrate from joy, from peace, from love, and are committed enough to do that, that if a person falls, they'll get back up again and start doing it again. If life gets tough, and life can get incredibly tough and painful and traumatic and horrible, and we all see that happening every day. But when that happens, you take a breath and keep on going. You keep that commitment to the journey going, because, when we're walking on this path, we may be walking through heaven, we may be walking through hell, we may be walking through the past, we may be walking through our imaginations of the future. But the point is to keep on walking, because whatever it is we're seeing is not the end point, because there is no end point. It's an infinite journey.
Infinite journey.
Infinite journey. Yeah.
Well, Richard, as we wrap up today, just leave our listeners with a little word. And I want to ask you, for those that might be curious, what guidance might you offer about the power of plant medicine?
On one hand, be very careful. because you are dealing with incredibly powerful substances. And you want to make sure that you find somebody who can be a companion. I'm not going to say even a guide, but somebody who could be a guide and a companion on this journey for you that is clear, is clean, has done their work, is not operating out of self-interest or out of an unhealed ego. And there's way too many people doing that right now. Make sure that they're walking a path of complete integrity. People will fall, but if they, do their healing to bring themselves back into harmony and balance, they learned from it. But some people use the power of plant medicines for their own needs, for their own reasons, and avoid those. The second thing is don't watch a lot of YouTube videos from people doing ceremonies, because a lot of those things are people who are crazy. There's some really good ones out there, but use discernment, be discerning. Is it opening your heart, or is it taking you into fear or anger or judgment? What I learned in doing my work is that there's many, many ways to do this work. There's people that will be attracted more to the very religious aspects of the Brazilian traditions, the Santo Daime and União de Vegetal. And there's people who will be more attracted to the shamanic things from Peru. The Shipibo culture certainly has value to it, and the songs are amazing. Or more people who will be more syncretic, which is what a lot of the people up north are doing now, of incorporating Sufi music and Indian music and chants and native chants and other things. Whatever it is, it should be beautiful. Whatever it is, it should trigger beauty in you. If it's weird, if you perceive it as being weird, it may be weird. It may not be weird. It may just be your own perception. But if you perceive it as weird, be careful, because it might be weird. But if you perceive it as something that, makes your heart sing even a little bit, that's a good indication that the inner radar is tuning into something that'll be good for you. And
Yeah, you've used the expression healing must end in beauty.
yeah, healing to be true healing must end in beauty. And I think that's really important to understand and to take to heart, because, if you're not being led into beauty, if you're not being led into that joy and into that love, it's unlikely that you're being led into healing by your own heart, by your mind, by somebody else, whatever it is. Beauty heals. Absolute beauty heals absolutely. Not talking about physically necessarily, but heals the soul. Heals that part of us that doesn't die.
Well, Richard, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today and sharing with our listeners your unique contribution and approach to plant medicine, and really emphasizing that ayahuasca is a spiritual practice and sharing some of your perspectives around that. So I so appreciate your time. But before we go, share with our listeners where they can connect with you and learn more about you and your work and your upcoming book. Where can they do so?
I'm holding up a book. Trust and Forgive, the Medicine of Your Life. The stories that I told today and the ideas and philosophies I share is just a little bit of what's in this book. And there are stories that will astound the person who reads them, and ideas that might astound you. And it's based on, 20 years of experience working with plants, 20 plus years, and almost 40 years of working with healing. So it's a really deeply beneficial book to read. I have a website that's based on Egyptian cosmology. It's called Heart Feather. And Heart Feather was one of those things that I woke up in the middle of the night and like, www.heartfeather.com. Mine. And it's based on the idea, it's based on the idea that when a person dies, this is Egyptian, okay? When a person dies, they're put in front of Osiris, who takes their heart out and puts it on a scale. And then Ma'at takes the scale and holds it up and puts a feather on the other side. And if the heart weighs more than the feather, the person is denied admittance into the beautiful heavenly realms.
Mm.
If the feather weighs more than the heart, in other words, if the heart is lighter than a feather, that's where the term light as a feather came from, the person is allowed admittance. So my journey, my goal, personal for others, is to help people make their hearts lighter than that feather. So heartfeather.com.
Oh, it's awesome. I so appreciate that sentiment and the intentionality behind it. Richard, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed our speak with you today.
Thank you, Peter. Likewise, this was delightful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you, our listeners, for taking the time to join us. You can follow us on our social media at Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, and more at Behavioral Health Today. If you like our show, please give us 5 stars and leave us a review. As always, the resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/PHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today. We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.